G-Man Boxing. Do you know what I mean? Every single live he donates. I see him on other lives donating. He's got the bag on it.
Alright people, midweek report time. And look, there's a few things to talk about, but first and foremost, AJ Usyk. We had the press conference. Now, going into this press conference, before I saw the image of Usyk in training where he looked in good shape, you were hearing varying reports. You heard some people say that he wasn't looking, when they say he's not looking in the best shape, not that he's fat. You know, I don't think I've ever seen Usyk out of shape in that regard, but I think more so to the fact of that he's maybe regressed in terms of his muscle, if you know what I mean, that he was looking maybe not the best, that he wasn't doing the best in camp. When I seen those images of him training, and obviously we only seen the images, but he looked good in the images. When I see him at this press conference, he looks in good shape. Man, Usyk looks in good shape. And the thing about this press conference, right? You know what I'm going to talk about. I seen the stare. I seen the both guys having the stare down. And when Fury and Wilder did that, because it's similar to Fury and Wilder if you think about it, because they did a very long stare down. With that, I got the impression that both guys, I don't want to say they were taking the piss, but it didn't strike me as being that deep, if you know what I mean. For Fury, it was a bit of fun and games. For Wilder, maybe there was, but I don't think it was the be-all and end-all. With AJ and Usyk, it was more so with AJ, it was like AJ was making a point. You look away first, because I'm not looking away. And I mean, when you look at Usyk's eyes when he locked on AJ, I mean, like Usyk's eyes, they were locked on AJ. And he looked focused. I mean, that's a man right there who's focused, is Oleksandr Usyk. And AJ lost that stare down, in my opinion, when he started gesturing to Usyk to look away. I think at that point, kind of Usyk, kind of, you can almost see the little kind of grimace on his face, or a little smile or say on his face, where he was like, I got you. Like, not in terms of the fight, but round one to Usyk in that regard from a stare down point of view. Now, you can't read that much into stare downs, but if AJ really did go in there with the mindset of, you know, I'm going to make sure you're the first person to blink, and AJ was the one blinking, maybe straight away you could think like, oh, could something be going on in there in terms of mentally, because I done a live with Outmatch Boxing. Subscribe to Outmatch, by the way, if you haven't. And I said that it's all well and good for Anthony Joshua to talk up a good game. What I mean by that is, it's all well and good to say you have this killer mindset. You know, it's all well and good to, you know, listen to, you know, motivational speakers, guys, you know, who say this, that, and the other. A bit like Tunde Ajayi. You know, Tunde Ajayi is a perfect example of it, who sounds like he's giving a motivational speech. What was it? He says, see it, receive it, or see it, believe it, receive it. Really good example like that, where he's like, you know the kind of things he was saying. He's like, they say this, well, I say this, and I'm right because I believe it. You know, obviously it's a poor Tunde Ajayi impression, but you know what I mean. And with AJ, I think that maybe he's got into that mindset where he's telling himself consistently, it's going to be this, it's going to be different this time, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. But the reality of it is, you can have the best game plan in any aspect of life. You could have the best game plan for a job interview. When you're there in that pressure situation, it's very different. You know, you could rehearse it 100 times. You could say it in your head 1,000,000 times that I'm this, I'm that, I'm X, Y, and Z. When you're in that pressure situation, the reality kind of hits you. And if you've any chinks, it's going to come out. With this press conference, that was what I mainly took from it. You know, Anthony Joshua, as he does, and you got to give him credit for this, acknowledging the fact that in the first fight, he came up second best. There was no excuses, which, you know, for fighters, you know, Deontay Wilder kind of was, where it's just like, what the hell? With AJ, it was just like, it happened. And what I like saying with fighters, and AJ was kind of hinting at this, is when they say things like, on the night he was better. Because understand what they're saying. They're not saying that he is the better fighter. They're saying that on that given night, he was the better man. That doesn't mean that the next night he's going to be a better man. So AJ is really kind of, the way he was coming across in the press conference, I thought it was good in that sense. It didn't seem like, he was looking for any kind of, shoulder to cry or anything like that with the loss. He just seemed like, okay, it is what it is, it happened, but I'm going right back in there, and we see what happens. In terms of this fight, we're 2 months away from it. Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. I mean, I have what they're being reportedly paid here. So it says that the rematch and the site deal is reportedly $80 million, which equates to £65 million, breaking the previous record paid for AJ's 2019 rematch with Andy Ruiz. Fight is 50-50 financial split between fighters. Crazy money. At the end of the day, like, as much as maybe Eddie Hearn or AJ would say we'd like to have it in the UK, I mean, when you see figures like that, it's very hard to say no. Just that's crazy. 65 million. Crazy. And obviously AJ and Usyk will get the lion's share of the money. I mean, like, AJ's undercards, a lot of them are 258 management fighters, but it's normally never the best. The lion's share of the purse goes to AJ and the opponent, and obviously Usyk in this case getting 50-50. But just a crazy amount of money. It really is. But in terms of the press conference itself, the stare down was the kind of bit that really would kind of had my kind of interest peaked. I mean, after the rest of it was just kind of was what it was, but the stare down really for me, I was looking at it like, that was interesting. And Usyk just looks focused. Like, he's always focused, but the way he was staring back at AJ, he just looked in his own. So I look forward to this fight. As I said, I do think we're in for a treat. I can't see it being a boring fight. The first one was definitely a good fight, and I think this fight's going to be very, very, very interesting. Very interesting. AJ going for the jugular as he said he will. It could pay dividends. It could also backfire spectacularly. With Oleksandr Usyk, some people speculate as to whether, mentally maybe he's shown a bit of fragilities based upon what's, happened in the last few months, and that is a possibility, sure. But my way of looking at Usyk is this is a guy who's shown unbelievable mental strength throughout the course of his career. And I seriously doubt it'll be any different this time in terms of Usyk, having any mental fragility there. I don't think there will. So I think this is a tremendous fight. I look forward to it like I did the first one. It's funny, right? After AJ Klitschko was the last fight I really, really, really got excited for, until AJ Usyk, because those were two fights where it was just like the week before I was just counting the days down. Normally with fights, look, I love boxing, but I've kind of gone to the stage, I've watched boxing that long, that the big fights, I kind of take them as they are. I know they're coming, I'm happy for them, and I watch them and I enjoy them. But in terms of being just really on edge, really, like, not on edge, but really excited, really hyped, they're the two fights that have done it for me, and I reckon this one's going to be no different. I'm really looking forward to this rematch. I really am. Be interesting to see what style both guys are, how both guys approach it, how both guys, adjust in the ring, because I imagine that both guys may have to adjust their game plan on the fly based upon what the opponent is doing. And for me, it's just, I cannot wait for this rematch. And I always like to see a strong undercard, I do, but I really want to see this fight. And the funny thing is, right, we complained a bit about the AJ Usyk undercard first time around. That undercard wasn't bad. That undercard, like, looking back in hindsight, we looked at it and said, oh geez, these fights are kind of, apart from the Akali fight, all the other fights, we got a big knockout with Callum Smith. The Campbell Hatton fight was a robbery. It was. The Akali fight was what it was. It was a blowout. I think Isaac Chamberlain knocked that guy out in a round in his next fight. And who else was on that card? Florian Marku. That wasn't a bad fight either. So it was an interesting fight. It was an interesting card, I should say. And we'll wait and see what this one is like. Speaking of fighters as well, obviously we're talking about this. This only broke today, Wednesday the 22nd of June. It broke at 20-12 on the Sheffield Star. And it's reporting that Billy Joe Saunders is now training with Dominic Ingle, a potential comeback date in December. Now this is interesting. Billy Joe Saunders back training with Dominic Ingle, as is being reported here. It says Saunders, who held The WBO middleweight and super middleweight titles has not fought since his 2021 defeat to Canelo Alvarez. He'd previously been trained by Dominic Ingle from 2017 until 2019. He did indeed. So he said he came back a couple of weeks. He came a couple of weeks back just to find his feet. Got away from home, Ingle told the Star. So Dominic Ingle is actually quoting him here. He's aiming to fight in December. His nutritionist, Greg Murata, is based in Sheffield. We've got to sit down and work out a plan of where we go from here. That's another conversation I need to have when I get back to Sheffield. It might work out, it might not. Saunders representatives insisted he was currently retired. He was currently retired and not returning to boxing when contacted. So contradicting here. So you've Dominic Ingle saying that they're going to see where it goes. But Billy Joe Saunders representatives are saying he's currently retired and not boxing again. It's understood he is currently not in Sheffield while receiving treatment for an injury. Obviously, Saunders was trained by Mark Tibbs for his last fight. Yeah, they're going on kind of a dare. But that's interesting. That's very interesting. So, conflicting reports here, which is true. So, we're hearing Dominic Ingle say Billy Joe Saunders looks likely to go back training with him. And personally, I felt that under Dominic Ingle is the best Billy Joe Saunders looked as a fighter. Not just aesthetically, but as a fighter. It seemed Ingle's style and Ingle's approach brought the best out of Billy Joe Saunders. And Billy Joe Saunders is a fighter who has said it before. He needs to be out of his comfort zone in order to get the best out of himself. This is a guy, when he left Mark Tibbs the first time, 2017, he went and trained with Adam Boot in London. And as Billy Joe Saunders said himself, he was too close to temptation. He was too close to friends. So what he had to do was he had to leave Adam Boot and go up north to Sheffield. Lived in Kid Galahad's attic room. And why did he do it? Because he was away from all that temptation. He was up in Sheffield training with Dominic Ingle. He looked in good shape. His career best performance against Lemieux. And 2017 to 2019, in many ways you could say they were his best years. Now, Billy Joe during that time did split from Ingle briefly. If you may remember, when he fought a Sufi, it was Ben Davison in the corner. But the very next fight, which was on the undercard of Jake Paul KSI, I think it was, he actually had Ingle back in the gym. He went back to Mark Tibbs. I mean, that relationship that's gone. Now, interesting if Billy Joe moving forward with his career, what's going to happen. So, representatives are saying that he's retired, and to be honest with you, I'd well believe it, to be honest with you, because I think Billy Joe Saunders, Jesus, I mean, I think that his best years are well and truly gone now at this. I think they were his best years, what I just said, but you never know, for the right fight, he may decide, to come back. We talked about Golovkin. He showed a few kind of clips of that. I want to play devil's advocate here. And I could be completely off with this and someone can turn around and say, gee, you're going down a rabbit hole with this, but just hear me out. Billy Joe Saunders' team insisting he's retired, right? And Dominic Ingle saying that Billy Joe is looking to get back training with him. Play devil's advocate here. You could say, gee, you're talking BS. But what if Billy Joe said he's looking to get back to he's looking to get back to fighting. He is training with Dominic Ingle, and some guys from VADA come knocking and say, okay, because we've seen Billy Joe looking in terrible shape aesthetically, big chubby face. Well, that way it's going to come off somehow. How quickly can you get it off? And have we forgotten about the nasal spray? I'm chucking that out there. Just chucking it out there. You could turn around and say, gee, you really walked into that one. That was an out there one. But all I say is, I'm sure fighters have done that. Said they've been retired in order to avoid getting tested. I'm sure that has happened. But we'll watch that story with an interesting eye. Billy Joe either retired or going back to Dominic Ingle, one or the other. In terms of other fights that have been announced, obviously Andy Ruiz versus Luis Ortiz. That is announced September 4th, a Sunday in LA. So Ruiz's first fight back since the Chris Algieri fight. Did I say Chris Algieri? Chris Arreola. Andy Ruiz would have ate. He would literally eat Chris Algieri for breakfast and then say, this guy's not got enough meat on his bones, I want a Snickers. No, he will fight Luis Ortiz on September 4th. Yeah, first fight since the Areola fight, which was in April last year. So inactivity for Andy Ruiz, really not a good thing. I think Andy Ruiz has a lot to offer the heavyweight division if he can stay active and get in decent shape. In terms of September's a busy month because Canelo Alvarez, Triple G, we know that fight's happening. T-Mobile Arena, I believe it was the host, I believe the T-Mobile Arena had the first two fights. It's going to kill the trilogy off. Savannah Marshall, Clarissa Shields, you undisputed WBC, WBA, IBF, WBO middleweight world titles reportedly set to take place on September 10th in London. So Shields, Marshall, we are going to see that fight. I've said it once, I'll say it again. I make Savannah Marshall heavy favourite in that fight. I think she knocks Clarissa Shields out. I think that Savannah Marshall work with Peter Fury. Savannah Marshall is one of the very few female fighters I will happily watch. I mean, look at that last... And see, here's the thing about Savannah Marshall as well. It's not just the fact she's a big puncher. It's the technique she gets into her shots. I mean, you look at the knockout she got in her last fight, and that was a one-punch KO clean. It wasn't just that she hit the opponent hard, which she did with a good left hook. Look at the way she threw it. Brilliant technique. Rotated her shoulders. Her feet placement was brilliant. You don't see that. She's not one of these fighters who just goes out and starts slapping. When Savannah Marshall is throwing, she's rotating her fist at the right point to get maximum power. She gets all her leverage into shots. Tremendous puncher. And Peter Fury in her corner as well. Man, I can't see how Clarissa Shields wins that fight. I really can't. I think Savannah Marshall's going to stop her. I really do. I think Savannah Marshall stops her. In terms of other fight, a fight that's happening tomorrow, which is, and I just, you got to laugh at this last part here, but Jarrell Big Farmer Miller will face Ariel Esteban Bracamonte. Now, Bracamonte, you may remember, had that war with Dave Allen. I think that was on the Usyk Bellew undercard. He will have his first fight in 3.5 years against him. This will take place in Buenos Aires, Argentina. And when I said the funny part, listen to this. The event is part of the WBA's KO Drugs Festival. I mean, you have the poster boy for failed drugs test on this card. Damn. So Big Farmer Miller makes his comeback. He has been looking huge in the pictures I've seen. It'd be interesting to see what he weighs in at. Really interesting to see what he weighs in at, because he looks still north of 300 pounds, seriously. And against Bracamonte, he's not too durable. So it's going to be difficult to gauge where he's at and what he's like, but he's been out of the ring for 3 years. Nearly 4 years in November. Let's see. Will I watch it? I won't watch it live, but I probably will watch the highlights the next day just to see what he looks like. But as I said, I can't imagine Bracamonte is going to tell us too much about where Miller is. This is a really interesting one. Olympic gold medalist and 3-time world champion and gold medalist, Andy Cruz has reportedly defected from Cuba, leaving the country in order to become a professional boxer. Now, Andy Cruz is one of the most talented amateurs I've seen in many a year. I mean, him and Keyshawn Davis. Keyshawn Davis is with Top Rank, and Keyshawn Davis is a tremendous prospect, one of the best prospects in boxing. Now, Keyshawn Davis itself, I mean, Keyshawn Davis struggled. I don't think he ever beat Andy Cruz as an amateur. He lost in the Olympic final to Andy Cruz, and that was probably one of their more competitive fights. Alright? Keyshawn Davis shows tremendous mental strength to be able to still bring it to Andy Cruz at every chance he gets, knowing that his record against him is not good. These two on a collision course in the pro game, I love it. I think that these two in a collision course in the pro games, Andy Cruz, Keyshawn Davis, and Andy Cruz is a tremendous talent. If I've not said that already, I'll say it again. Tremendously talented fighter. I think that Andy Cruz, take this one to the bank, but he will be a world champion within 3 years. Maybe even less than that, within 3. I just think how the lightweight division is looking out, right? You could have Keyshawn Davis, Shakur when he moves up, as well as Andy Cruz, them 3 names alone, on top of the guys we have there now, I'd say in 3-4 years time, if all of them probably will have moved up by then. But the lightweight division is in good hands, certainly. I wonder would Andy Cruz start his career at 130? Maybe. You do see that with a lot of amateurs. It's very seldom enough anyway, that you see an amateur, who say fights as say like light heavyweight as an amateur, which is 81 kg, 178 pounds. More often than not, they'll start at super middleweight and progressively go up to light heavyweight, because obviously the weigh-ins are different for the amateurs. It's the same day as opposed to 24, sometimes even more than that, 32 hours before the fight night when you have the weigh-in. So you see a lot of them cutting the weight, hence the reason why they do it. In terms of other news, Artur Beterbiev, Anthony Yarde, looking like it's going to be in October. I've already talked about that already, but I'll reiterate. Anthony Yarde against Beterbiev. You know, again, I said it with Outmatch the other night. He certainly hasn't gone down the road, which many fighters have, of find the easiest champion and take that fight. Having said that, at light heavyweight, there is no easy champion. You know, there just isn't that light heavyweight. But you got to give Anthony Yarde credit to show the mental fortitude to be willing to go in there. And he's willing to go in with Beterbiev. He was willing to go to Silyabinsk Russia and fight Kovalev. Do I think he'll win? No, I wouldn't put a penny on Yarde winning. But don't think that Anthony Yarde is going to go in there and one punch knockout in the first round. I think he'll get knocked out. I think he'll get taken to space. But I do see him, maybe with his speed, a bit like how Marcus Brown did. With his speed early on, maybe being able to have some success, win a round or two. But ultimately, Beterbiev has probably forgotten more about boxing than Anthony Yarde has ever known. And I mean no disrespect, but Beterbiev was an accomplished amateur, very accomplished amateur. And, you know, he's been in there with guys like, you know, Vodcek, Brown, Smith, you know, guys like that, Tavoris Cloud, I believe he fought. Guys like that who, I mean, would you pick Lyndon Arthur over any of them? Maybe Cloud, but I wouldn't pick him over any of them. You know, so Yarde's got his work cut out, but credit to him if this fight does take place. Credit to him for taking it, but I can't see him winning that fight at all. In terms of other news, obviously the news on Josh Taylor. Now Josh Taylor, I'll get it for you here, get the quotes. We know now he's sticking around at 140 pounds. He's confirmed that. He confirmed that on the Scottish National. He's confirmed that he'll be sticking around at 140 pounds and will make a defence of his now unified titles, because he's been stripped of the WBA, against Jose Zepeda. He insists that the reason why he's going to remain at 140 pounds is he's going to rematch Jack Catterall after he faces Jose Zepeda. Jose Zepeda is no mean feat. I mean, if Josh Taylor comes in the way he did in terms of everything, in terms of having a hard weight cut and not looking as good as he did against Catterall, Jose Zepeda is a great fighter, world level fighter, one of the best in the division. So you never know what might happen there. I like Josh Taylor, but you never know what will happen with Jose Zepeda. He's a good fighter, a very good fighter. He goes on to say, the only reason I'm staying at this weight is to fight Jack Catterall again. All the abuse I've been getting and the way Jack's been, I want to shut his mouth. The single reason I'm staying at this weight is to shut him up and everyone else. In terms of people saying he's scared, it's frustrating. I'm not scared to fight anybody. But boxing fans are so fickle. They change like the weather, and if they didn't have the keyboard in front of them, there's no way they'd say it. But I think, Josh, most people, if you take the keyboard away from the majority of people, they wouldn't have that. I mean, you don't just see it with boxing, you see it with absolutely everything. You know, I mean, there are people who, madly enough, love being trolls. And I think they do it for just gratification for somebody. They love it. It's bizarre to me how people can do it. And I've seen people love it. You know, they take being blocked as something of a win. Yes, look what I've done. I've infuriated this person to the extent he's blocked me. Now make another account and I'll do it again. Crazy. But in terms of the Jack Catterall fight and him saying that that's the main reason why he's staying at 140, do I think Josh Taylor is scared of Jack Catterall? No, I certainly don't. Certainly not. But if you look at it from a business point of view, going up to 140 at this stage makes no sense. Or sorry, 147 at this stage doesn't make an awful lot of sense. The titles are tied up with Spence and Crawford. They're looking to fight one another. In terms of all the other guys, there's not many top-ranked fighters at welterweight. There's bigger fights at 140 pounds, i.e. the Catterall rematch and the Zepeda fight. If Josh Taylor does take the Jack Catterall rematch, I think that he will learn from his mistakes, and he will, if he didn't take Jack Catterall serious the first time, he'll definitely take him serious the second time after being dropped by him. We need to see how he does against Jose Zepeda. We need to see how he looks on the scale, because he looked very bad on the scale now last time. Was it an element? And maybe it was, because look, I'll be frank, I didn't give Jack Catterall much of a shot in the first fight, or for the only fight. I didn't give him much of a shot. I thought Josh Taylor would beat him mid-rounds. The times I'd seen Jack Catterall fight before. He'd been on, BT Sport. He was signed by Frank Warren at one stage. I don't know if he still is, but he was definitely with Frank. I think he's with Rebellum now. But I'd seen him fight against O'Hara Davis, several others, Tyrone McKenna, and he looked alright without looking spectacular. It's the best way to describe it. He looked okay without looking spectacular. And I thought, solid European level fighter. That's Jack, a solid European level fighter. And maybe Josh Taylor looked at that and thought, you know what? I'm at home. It's a homecoming. It's an easier touch than, say, a Jose Zepeda or a Prograis rematch. And, I'm good. And obviously he wasn't. It was a much tougher fight than any of us expected it to be. Josh Taylor was dropped. He got an absolute gift. One of the worst decisions I've ever seen in boxing. I mean, there's no way he won that fight. So, Josh Taylor, I think, going into a rematch, if in fact it takes place, he will himself know, okay, no messing around, 100%. Fighting fit, 100%. In terms of Jack Catterall, I think that it's a shame the way he's been treated by sanctioned bodies at the WBO. I mean, the WBO made him mandatory. And we've seen lesser robberies, sanctioned bodies, all of them, order rematches for lesser robberies. Much lesser. And every single one of them sanctioned bodies just threw Catterall under the bus. Why did they do that? They did it because he's not a cash cow. It's unfortunate, that's the way it is. He's not a cash cow. If Jack Catterall was in any way a fighter who was drawing an awful lot of money, bet your bottom dollar, if not all them sanctioned bodies would be saying, mandatories to one side, rematch. They're not doing that. Why aren't they doing that? Because I don't think a rematch, to the hardcore fans who've seen what we saw, it means something to us. It does. Jack Catterall should have been undisputed champion, should have had his moment. But for sanctioned bodies, looking at that, they're thinking, where's our sanction fees going to come from? We'll make way more money having, world title fights with these guys, or Josh Taylor having a rematch with Prograis. We'll make more money from that. Jack Catterall, he was fighting in Leicester Arenas only a few years ago. He's not going to make us money. Yeah, we gave him a mandatory shot, but in terms of rematch, a rematch isn't going to make us money. And I know that sounds cynical, like obviously it's doing the pressure of a sanctioned body there, but Jack Catterall isn't a cash cow. He's not. And I reckon if he was, they'd be straight away ordering rematches, saying Jack Catterall can have his rematch immediately. Josh Taylor has to fight him. They're not doing that because he's not a cash cow. And it all comes down to money at the end of the day, people. Unfortunately, it's the way it is. In terms of everything else, I think I've touched on pretty much everything. Midweek reports don't tend to be as long as a review of the week because I normally don't have fights to talk about. But obviously, interesting with Miller. I want to see what Big Pharma looks like tomorrow. So we'll keep an eye on that one. But in terms of everything else, I think we're good. I hope you enjoyed it. We've been doing spectacular work the last few days. The numbers have been up crazy. 130 subs in a week. We're doing well. We hit 7,820 today. So, 180 away from AK. It is now the end of June. Doubt we'll do it in a week, but can we do it in a fortnight? 3 weeks? Middle of July, AK? And then a nice push to the end of the year? Get to the glorious 10, the big 10 by the end of the year? I think we can. Of course we can. And believe me, I know I'm away next week, but I've got a lot planned for that week in terms of pre-recording things. I mean, the weekend I'm going to be recording a lot, so there'll be plenty to come next week as well. For now, I'll talk to you people. Peace.